Well, hello everyone. Here you show you right here. I'm talking about right here of cover letters right here, and a lot of times it sure seems that way that we want to ask the question to her that what exactly is the main point about writing a cover letter? Are we necessarily trying to speak about the main topics and the main opinions about why we're applying for the job, and also it's just another way of how to exaggerate about for how you found the company, and a lot of times that you want to too is toward there are some cover letters that you can write out there that illustrate toward about how you heard about the position, and let's just say if it's a corresponds to like an advertisement or something like that. And I know everybody else would say too that well, most of the time that if you look through the catalogs, or maybe if you heard on the radio or looked in the papers or something like that, then that's how you heard about the job. So it sure seems that way that when we speak about cover letters, though, it's like you were to go ahead and write them just based on your experience about how you heard about the job, but still that let's just say that if you were to write a cover letter in a talk, so I talked about as to where if somebody were to say something like, I will take it from here. And so a lot of times you want to know too, what exactly does that mean on any source of cover letter or any source of a document? And let's just say that if we're talking about maybe an Excel file or something like that, and 102 that you actually show somebody how to use something and how to do something, right? And a lot of times it seems like it all kind of goes by your self-esteem to where you're going to go in and show somebody how to use something and work something, and then by the time that person gets the idea of how something works, and then like I say that that they'll go ahead and it's another way of stating to where that they'll go ahead and take over from where like knowing about that the typical guidance especially. So a lot of times at the time you want to know too that well really it really means the fact about that person is able to handle the job dependently toward it whenever they're able to get some ideas based on your guidance, and then just knowing about how well that they're able to do the job, even though that you'll be checking back within time to time just to make sure everything's all right, that sort of thing. But on the other hand, it sure seems that way that when we talk about I will take it from here. And so if I were to be highlighting a few of these words and sentences right here, and like talk about for I am, if you're only able, if I am the only help, but then also have right here talk about the work that I do is associated with computers right here, computer programs. So if I were to highlight these two words right here and think as to where well really that whenever you highlight any word on a cover letter, that when what's necessarily the reason for that? Like, well, really, that even if you're going to be underlining a letter, and want to know that hey, that whenever you do write a cover letter, that at least within about 11 sentences to explain about what is it that you do and what is it that you were trained for, and also anything else that you would like to share so far as like it's like an introduction, like it's pretty much it's an introduction, right? But on the other hand, that let's just say that whenever you first start working on a task, though, that you may have no clue on what you gotta do and maybe where to start. So a lot of times it sure seems that way that the typical English, the typical English writing, though, that if we're talking about is toward well, if you were to start out the sentence by stating toward well, really, that I get the idea, or something like that, I can take it from here, or I will take it from here, or something like that. So it sure seems that way that when we start at the any source of response, though, and like in case of anybody that may one or two, is to where that whenever you're going to be writing a cover letter, though, that what exactly who exactly are you talking to necessarily, and for anything is to where if you're going to be writing any sort of cover letter, though, that the first thing that you're thinking about most of the time is that yeah, well, really, that whenever you first start writing, that who else could be reading this, and you're likely thinking that, yeah, well, the person who could be reading this, and like, but still, I am pretty confident. I am confident in learning things, but it sure seems that way. That when we think about a cover letter, though, that you want to go ahead and say a few things, and let's just say that a few of those things could also be a buzz. Is that if you want to include right here on the bottom, right here, talking about that the time, the gaining knowledge and the availability, right? But on the other hand, that what exactly is it that why you would include certain sayings on a cover letter? And let's just say that if you were to say something like, "I'll show you what I got." So really, that why would you want to include that on on a cover letter? Why would you want to include those words of speech on a cover letter? And to me, though, that in case of anybody that may wonder too, that we don't need to think about a cover letter as like if you're going to be going to a dance party or something like that, doing any sorts of competition. But let's just say that on average, though, that if we're talking about maybe at least 10 or maybe 25 or maybe 50 applicants who are applying for a job or anything that you're going to be trained for, right? And so it sure seems that way that a lot of times it's like you would maybe say something like I'll show you what I have, maybe at the interview or something, if you're called for an interview or something like that, maybe during any sorts of conference call or something like that. But I mainly want to talk about it here, talking about what does that mean when we say I'll show you. I'm like, yeah, I'll take it from here. So if I were to say something like that, and like I start a new sentence right here, and say to where that, yeah, well, really, I will take it from here, because the most important idea came came from following my if you want to call it like it came from following. So came from following the manager, or it could also be anybody that was trained, clients or anybody, but still that. So if you were to add in a few words of sentences right there, and I want to know just a little bit too that why is it that you would say something like, I will take it from here. I got the important ideas came from following, and I am the only hope, and also that we've probably seen this already, but the online cloud to talk about for the skills, for which I know that providing the electronic access to files using the online cloud. So these are the sorts of sayings that I would have on a cover letter that talks about what I figured out, and of course the things that would I assume from how you do certain settings. And so yeah, so there's different ways of how you want to write the cover letter, right? But at the time, you want to know too is to where that that do you think that you would have to write a separate cover letter just to explain about if you're trying to have your employer reach out to you for further information, or just to review further details about your assessments or something like that, and then also to complete a review or something like that. So a lot of times it sure seems that way that that the first thing we all know that whenever it comes to applying for a job, it seems like it's always going to be about attention, right? So really, that if we're talking about a manager that's going to maybe call you in for an interview, what I mean by attention, meaning by is to where that if the interview does last longer than 10 minutes. So if the interview does last longer than 10 minutes and you know for sure, like everybody else would say too, that well, half the time you want to know too that do you really keep track of time whenever you're in those interviews, such as, well, okay, did you get the job, or if you did not get the job, and also that the way we think about that too is to where that most of the time 10 minutes, but let's just say that on average maybe up to 3 minutes or something like that. So a lot of times it's like you go in for an interview and they're gonna be looking over your work and tell you about what they're going to decide on, and we'll get back to you about the position. And so a lot of times it's like when we think about a cover letter though, do we necessarily think about most of the time is to where that the things that you would want to put on a cover letter would be about stuff like the things that most companies would be looking for. What for what is the overall expectation and what is needed. And let's just say though that if you're going to say something like on your cover letter though is to where that something like smart with intelligence. So if you were to say that on a cover letter, but I just really think too that I'm actually just writing that so that way we can see that right there. But still that I could probably say that that a number of words like the ways of how you would like to get the company's attention, especially. But let's just say though, that on average though, that most of the time that whenever it comes to the work for which you worked hard for, and the work for which you were trained for, the kind of work that you actually learned at your own time independently though, that what's one thing that we could probably think about is that whenever it comes to training and doing an assessment, right? And you want to know too is that hey, that whenever you do put in an application for a job though, that I can go ahead and highlight this for talk about for recommend it, right? So a lot of times it's like whenever you do apply for a job, it seems like most of the time it's all about, well, this is required and then that's required, and well, we need to see this or we need to see that. So it seems like there's always like these set rules to where that this is required and then that's required, just before you can. I'm like, yeah. So let's just say that on average though, that whenever you go to a job interview, that they're going to say that 1 year of employment is what's required. You'll just be qualified for more like vacation time, or if it's a maternity leave or anything like that. And so a lot of times it sure seems that way. That when we think about jobs most of the time, that really that when we think about a job, applying for a job, that do we necessarily think about is that you go ahead and write a cover letter explaining about what is it that you're interested in, and also that for what you do. And the way I think about though that how often are we really going to explain over the situation to where that why do you think that that any of the hard work that you do, that why do you think that somebody else would take over the position of what you were working on, unless for any reason if they felt more comfortable with what you were working with. So let's just say that anybody say that really if it's really about somebody who's anxious to know what happens next, and a lot of times it seems like that's really, I'm like, yeah, for what happens next. So really that so I just really think that somebody like you just really have to feel more comfortable with working the position, right? But on the other hand, that when we speak about a cover letter, though, that we're also talking about that whenever you do wind up working with somebody for at least an hour. So let's just say that on average, though, that somebody is going to feel more comfortable working at their own pace after 1 hour. So let's just say that that's the case right there. After 1 hour, or maybe if it's more than that, you're like, yeah, after 1 hour of training, and let's just say I can go and put on here for training right here. So a lot of times it sure seems that way that most of the time when we talk about a cover letter, though, that you would really want to write a cover letter toward that there's going to be a complete sentence right here. So a lot of the sentences that I'm putting in right here are just kind of, some of them are kind of squashed, and some of them are just like what you call just extra comments and all. But still, I'm just saying that when we think about a cover letter most of the time, that why do you think that you would want to spend more time writing a clear, presented cover letter whenever you're applying for a job? And one of those reasons is maybe going to be about is that really that you really would like to explain to that company about what is it that you do and what is it that you're good at, and just a little bit about yourself, and anything else, like etc., right? But on the other hand, that the way I think about it too, though, really, if it's really guaranteed that the job will be waiting, whenever I'm like, the job will be available, whenever you're able to start, and so it sure seems that way that whenever we think about a job most of the time, that let's just say that whenever you do apply for a job, that you're likely to want to know too that you actually did not get the job that you applied for, but then of course you got a response about another similar job opportunity. So I guess a lot of times that happens too, whenever you do get whenever you do get a response about a job opportunity, a job that you didn't apply for. So let's just say on average, though, that I'll, if somebody were to say something like I'll take it from here, but still. So it sure seems that way. Is it really all about the fact about moving forward? And I can put that like I can add that too, but people say that it's not really in complete sentences what you see right here, but still that moving forward. So in order to be able to move forward, though, that it's like that whenever you do move forward, that does that basically mean that you're getting somewhere, or is that just another way of stating toward it? Maybe like everybody else may even say too that can also maybe lead to a little bit of the bad news too. That you didn't get the job, or you were replaced, or something like that. But on the other hand, that when we speak about that I will take if you were to explain about I'll take it from here. We found so really that when we think about that the word talking about for I will take it from here, that is that another way of saying toward it? Really that that other somebody else is willing to take on those challenges after they watched you, after they feel more comfortable. This other person feels more comfortable doing that job just because that they were able to watch the other person do the job. And a lot of times it's like, most of the time it seems like that's really the case, right? For any other case, a scenario that we're talking about in 102, that hey, really that whenever you're training somebody on how to do something, that it's like, really, if you were to actually try it, yourself, do you think that maybe that you should be getting the same results whenever you do try it yourself, or if anything, that yeah, somebody's trying to show you something and they're trying to, this is how you do this and this is how you do that, and but a lot of times it sure seems that way that whenever you're going to be on job training, though, that you want to know too that a lot of times if somebody were to be saying something like that, I will take it from here, it's part about moving forward, and just to kind of get a better idea about what is it that you're working on. And so it's like, yeah, distiller and an ink copy right here. So yeah, talk about the typical cover letter right here. And but on your hand, that when we think about a cover letter, though, that really that should cover letters explain about the fact about like any source of advertisement? Do you think that whenever you do write a cover letter, that do you think that maybe you should explain like on a separate cover letter to where that reason maybe why that you should hire me than compared to hiring this other candidate, and also that yeah, and if you want to go and use a cover letter stating to where if you were absent from work, if you had to take the whole day off from work, and let's just say that if you forgot to call, I'm like, yeah, like everybody else would say too, the lot of ways of how to explain the cover letter, and like anybody else would say too, that will really that for the most part, that cover letters are supposed to be kind of like a doctor's note, not really, but on the other hand, that if that's really just another way up, I guess. But still, and another thing that I want to talk about right here to everybody too about is to where that what does it usually mean when we guess? Whenever you guess an answer to something, that's another thing that I want to talk about too. Whenever you guess an answer to something, what does that mean? Well, that you're thinking, yeah, right? That you're thinking about something. So let's just say that if you were being tested for something, and let's just say that if you were to take a guess, well, a lot of times it seems like, yeah, well, guessing, does guessing get you into more trouble, especially if you're talking about, yeah, if you're trying to take a test, or maybe if your teammates are counting on you to be able to get the answer right, to a quiz or something like that, then 102 that yeah, well, really, whenever you take a guess that you're pretty much are picking, I'm like, yeah, you're basically are picking. You're not really, it's not really a guarantee to get the answer right, but a lot of times it sure seems that way, that by guessing, you'll be guessing and assuming, right? But a lot of times it sure seems that way that when we speak about a cover letter, a typical cover letter, though, that why is it that you would start the word and phrase is like an introduction to where that you were to talk about your work experience, but then also that do you think that you should explain on a cover letter about jobs that you have had in the past, and also explain about okay, yeah, I am good at this or I am good at that, but yeah, I have my ups and downs, but at the same time that I really that according to what my references would also say too, is that yeah, that whenever I first started, that this is what was going on. So a lot of times it sure seems that way, that whenever you do work a cover letter, though, that you would write at least I know it, about 230, but still. On the maximum, I think the maximum is at least 180 words. But still, that when we think about a cover letter, though, it's supposed to be written clearly so that way managers and all will be able to read it, right? But at the same time, that those were a few things that I want to talk about right there. I'm talking about that, what does that mean whenever somebody says that they're going to go ahead and take over the position, from what I'm like, yeah, if they watch somebody else work or for anything that if they were needing assistance with something from earlier, but they're like, yeah, I'll go and take it from here. And so a lot of times it's like, yeah, that. So it sure seems that way. That what does that usually mean? And I know, like everybody else might say too, that that's another way of saying is toward yeah, well, a lot of that hard work that pretty much pays for itself, right? And what does that mean? Well, that means is toward yeah, well, really that a lot of people are able to, somebody or something about what your interactions about what you do that somebody else found that interesting or that they didn't find it as much difficult, this time compared to last time. So that's another way of how to explain it too. But really, that I think the key, the fact to remember is just know is that yeah, whenever you're working on something a lot of times, and it sure seems that way, that yeah, well, somebody else that could be looking at your work and 102 that yeah, well, the only time the only time that they would want to take over the job, of course, is that just knowing that whenever the task gets smaller. Yeah, whenever the task is that the tasks are smaller. And well, which it makes sense a lot of ways, but in some ways though, that like everybody else would say too, that if you come to the time where that whenever you show up for work, and then maybe if the team like yeah, until everybody else but still, if you're going to be working a job most of the time, it sure seems that way. That there are times to where that whenever employees, I'm like yeah, when people you show up for work, and then then you start your shift and all that, but still that but half the time you want to know too that whenever a task that gets smaller, and let's just say that those agendas are going to start out with toward it, yeah, that this is really all you gotta do right here is just look at that yeah, look at those ticket orders or something like that. So yeah, if they show you just a list of tasks, like another way of how you call it, like your occupation, and but still that the source of responsibilities and all that stuff. But on the other hand, though, that like it sure seems that way that when we speak about that, why would somebody mention to where that they'll go ahead and take to take the position that they'll go ahead and take over from there, and so a lot of times it's like yeah, well, really that some might say that that's another way of stating to where that it's all about the fact about it that that they're looking for something. They're looking for something, and by the time they get it, and then yeah, then they won't need any any too much for assistance, right? But still. So in a lot of ways, I really just think that I can go ahead and put on here too that that yeah, that most employers, if job seekers that are looking for something or looking for somebody, and looking for someone to do those tasks. So it's another way of saying toward the yeah, the looking for somebody to do those tasks. It's another way of saying that yeah, temporary. No, it's temporary. Those tasks temporary. So let's just say that yeah, it's just temporary until that we're able to get somebody else until we're able to yeah, but still. But on the other hand, it sure seems that way that when we speak about a cover letter, though, that yeah, whenever yeah, some like most of the time, about how much luck do you think that you usually have whenever it comes to working a job, and let's just say that until more team members show up, for the job and all that, and but still. But on the other hand, that when we speak about a cover letter, though, that why would you include I am only available to work, for the position that you're applying for, I'm only available to work on weekends. So a lot of employers would probably say too that, why would you want to set any sort of restriction and any sort of rule whenever it comes to not being flexible for the job? And it sure seems that way. That number one, though, that whenever you do apply for a job, though, that it's possible that you'll tell them that you don't have your license yet, or you don't have the proper training yet, until that you hear more about the training that you're able to get, and then so far as your experience goes and all. But those are the things that I really want to talk about right there. But on the other hand, that when we speak about a cover letter, though, is like to talk about the most important ideas, that come from what we follow. And so it's like, so if we were actually talking about doing any sorts of computer skills, though, and you're likely wondering that if you were to go ahead and include on a cover letter that these right here provide electronic access to the files using the online cloud. The position I am looking for is related to when my ideas become useful, making sure all documents. So what do I mean by that? I mean by is toward it whenever I do talk about a suggestion, whenever I suggest somebody to try something, that I'm not looking at no manual. There are thoughts and ideas that come to my mind, and I write them down, right? And so it's like every time I do start writing something, and then that's usually how I think. And so that's why that whenever I think about that, toward it, that my ideas that become useful, suggestions, and so that's why it sure seems that way. That whenever you do write a cover letter, though, that you want toward it, should you start out a cover letter by introducing who you are and what school you went to, and maybe about how you found out about the job, and maybe about the type of car you drive, and maybe about how well maybe how was your morning, or what did you have for breakfast, or something like that. Did you have a nice dinner or something like that? But on the other hand too, that when we speak about a cover letter, though, that we're also talking about is toward our voice that is recorded on a document, right? And it sure seems that way, that whenever we speak about a cover letter, though, that if we're talking about that most cover letters, if we're talking about maybe over 200 words of a cover letter, and you want to know too is toward it, do you think that companies are going to want to read this long letter just explaining about what is it that you learned and what is it that you had to talk about? And most of the time, it's about the results especially. So let's just say that if the work that you do, if it does work, and let's just say if there's progress made within 3 weeks after you start working a job, and chances are that companies or somebody at least would take an opportunity toward it, that they take about 3 minutes, just to be able to write, read a cover letter. And so that's why it sure seems that way, that talk about for clear sentences and any paragraph writing or anything like that. But still that I know with me, though, that in order to be able to become a professional writer, a cover letter writer, though, it sure seems that way, that you want to ask that question to where that should you be thinking about is to where that 3 other candidates that could be reading that letter, then compared to just maybe 2 other, like just one other person, to where you go and write that letter, and then that you allow somebody else who's working in the hiring position to go and read it. And that the first thing that you're going to probably say is toward it, really, that I am pretty confident in using new software. So what does that mean by what software? So it's like, so in a lot of ways that I just feel like saying too, that that whenever you're going to be writing a resume, a lot of times that you go ahead and include a cover letter, and that cover letter, of course, is going to explain the details about, okay, yeah, this is who I am, and if you're not familiar with what this is, okay, this is, and this paragraph right here on the bottom will explain a little bit more about what I'm talking about, and so a lot of times it sure seems that way, that it's all about your spaces, and so if you were to include like anywhere on the bottom right here of the cover letter, just to explain about, what do you mean by that on your resume, and what do you mean by this on your resume, so stuff like that. But anyway, yeah, thanks for watching, everyone. Talk about, say, for understanding about the jobs right here, but that's something I want to talk about. Is that talk about, for what does it mean whenever people say that I will take it from here. But anyway, thanks for watching, everyone. Have a great day.